and I can introduce you. So, John Malool, thank you very much for speaking, John. You're a face and a voice that's familiar to us. You've spoken before. Looking forward to your words of wisdom this time. So, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, want to apologize for not being in Baltimore with you. I had made every intention and plan to be there. However, this past Sunday, I had to put my mom into a hospice facility, and the doctors have suggested that I not travel 4 hours away due to the uncertainty of the inevitable. So there's nothing more that I wanted to do than to be with all of you. Baltimore is one of my favorite places to be. If you haven't had the crabs there, you're missing some of the best food you could have. And I certainly wanted to be there with all of you, but unfortunately, I was unable to travel the distance because of my mom. So,
and John, I'm sure on behalf of everybody, we send you our sympathies and good wishes at this time. Obviously, a difficult time for you.
Thank you. So, what I want to talk a little bit about is the basics of marine fire suppression systems. And as I survey boats, I am beginning to see more and more problems with that aspect of the survey as well. So I wanted to share certain things with you. Why is this not doing this? Okay, so that's me. I am a surveyor. I am the owner of Trident Marine Services, but I also happen to be a firefighter, and I am the fire chief in my community. And uniquely, I am a member of the ABYC Firefighting and Detection, PTC. So this is really kind of an important subject to me. So when we look at surveying vessels, besides looking at all the things that we do and, tapping holes and moisture meters and looking at the engines, and I was very fascinated by the sticky diesel presentation a little earlier. One of the things that we also need to look at are going to be the fire suppression on board the vessel. So what I would like to do in today's presentation is give you the ability to understand the importance of marine fire suppression systems and look at some of the areas that a marine surveyor should focus on when conducting a survey. We'll talk about the major components of a fire suppression system. We'll dispel certain inaccuracies and talk a little bit about some of the problems that I have recently discovered. And if we have time, we'll talk about some portable fire protection, portable fire extinguishers, because there have been some changes here in the United States regarding fire extinguishers as well. So what could be worse? We go out on a weekend with our family and this tragedy occurs. And certainly one of the things that might prevent a fire from getting to this magnitude is if we have a fire suppression system on board. But the fire suppression system is only going to be as good as its workability. And one of the things that I have begun to discover is that there are a lot of problems with fire suppression systems that a surveyor might overlook. We'll show you some slides and pictures of some of the vessels that I have recently surveyed that have all had problems with them. And I will tell you that in two of the situations, the boat had been surveyed previously for a previous sale by another surveyor, and everything was fine. And when I looked at some of the equipment on board this one particular vessel, it wasn't fine. In fact, the fire suppression system was doubtful if it would have operated at all. So when we talk about fire suppression systems on board a vessel, we're talking about two basic categories. We have the fixed system, like we would find in the engine room, and we have portable fire extinguishers, both of which have many concerns for the marine surveyor to be looking at and involved with. So here you see one of the very first fire suppression systems that was manufactured for the maritime industry. It is an automatic Halon 1301 system. The 1301 system was the first type of system developed for us for use, and we can still find these in use on board many vessels that we go on. What we do know is that in 1989, the Montreal Protocol determined that halon was a depleter of the Earth's ozone layer. And consequently, we will see that the United States Environmental Protection Agency banned its manufacture 5 years earlier. In 1989, the Montreal Protocol talked about the halon causing the depletion of the Earth's ozone layer and that we should not be using this material anymore. However, halon fire extinguishing systems may still remain in use until either A, the system is discharged, or the system requires repair or replacement. So if you find a system where there is a badly corroded cylinder, and it is doubtful that that cylinder is going to be allowed to continue in service, that would then be a repair or replacement. It cannot be replaced in kind. It has to be replaced with one of the newer systems. So what do we now have? We now have something that is referred to as a clean agent. A clean agent is an extinguishing agent that has replaced halon. According to the National Fire Protection Association, a clean agent is any type of extinguishing agent that is electrically non-conductive, is non-volatile, is gaseous, and does not leave any residue upon evaporation. This idea of a clean agent gets the name from the fact that it does not leave any residue and because it is environmentally friendly. So when we look at a fire suppression system on board a boat, we will now see that they are no longer halon 1301, but are FM 200 or FM 241. Both of those materials, because of their chemical makeup, are considered to be clean agents and meet the definition of a clean agent according to the NFPA. Now, when we look at a fire suppression system on board a marine application, there are several things that we should be looking at. And for the surveyor, these all require our attention. The cylinder itself, the mounting bracket, the actuator, the discharge nozzle, the remote actuator and actuator cables, and the indicator plate and light. All of these require the attention of the surveyor while we are conducting the survey. So what do we need to look at? I actually made up like a little checklist for myself when I go on board a boat and conduct a marine survey where there is one of these types of systems involved, and we look at certain things. Proper cylinder location and orientation. We'll talk about that, and you'll see in a slide that I put into this presentation, just recently surveyed a boat where it was factory installed and installed tremendously incorrectly. And you'll see that. Installation in relationship to the exhaust manifolds or turbochargers, something that we need to be aware of and concerned with. Installation in a compartment larger than the volume rating. So we have to take into account when we do our surveys, what is the volume of the engine room or the engine compartment on board a boat? And is the fire suppression system compatible with that volume? So if the volume is 300 cubic feet and the suppression system is only good for 250 cubic feet, it is not an acceptable suppression system, and the suppression system will not be effective in extinguishing the fire. Are we combining two or more units to protect a given compartment? We'll talk more about that. That's a really very, very important issue. Installation in diesel-powered vessels, we have extra concerns. We have to look at the actuator light and the manual pull activation. So let's take a little bit more in-depth look at these things. One of the biggest problems that we can find as surveyors deals with the location and the orientation of the cylinder. Cylinders, according to the various manufacturers, can be mounted in one of two ways: vertically with the actuator facing upward, or in a horizontal position. The following picture is taken directly from one of the installation manuals from a suppression system manufacturer. And here you see the two ways that they are approved: horizontally or vertically with the actuator in the upright position. It is not permitted to find a suppression system on board a vessel in that fashion. And if we were conducting a survey and we were in fact to find that, it would certainly require us to note in the survey report that there was an installation of the system in a non-approved fashion. Now, where do we place these cylinders? There are some very, very specific requirements. The cylinder can never be installed to the underside of a hatch cover. For an example, the hatch to the engine room, okay? And there's a very unique reason for this. The maximum distance of the nozzle to the ceiling of the engine room is 20 inches. So it has to be 20 inches or less. The cylinder should be installed as near to the center line of the area being protected as possible. So many times we see them tucked into a corner. Well, although the area of protection is compatible with the amount of cubic footage the suppression system can protect, it will perhaps take a little bit longer for the agent to fill the compartment space and extinguish the fire because it is placed in a out-of-the-way location. The actuator should face the opposite bulkhead towards the engines. All right, that's really very important. We want the suppression system material, the agent, to blow out into the engine compartment, not up against the transom wall. And the cylinder should not be mounted directly on a metal bulkhead because of our concern of corrosion and the contact of two incompatible metals, further increasing the possibility of corrosion. Now, if we look at some of the manufacturers, they will also tell us that the cylinder should not be installed on the bilge bottom itself. Don't put it on the floor of the bilge. It should be raised several inches off of the floor. This is a factory installed fire suppression system that was installed on the underside of the engine room hatch. Now, it is not permitted to do this. If you look at the manufacturer's installation requirements, they specifically tell you not to do this. And the reason is, in the event of an explosion in the engine compartment, what's most likely going to happen? The engine compartment hatch is going to come up, and consequently, the suppression system is going to be dispelled into the open air and not into the engine compartment itself, therefore not putting any of the agent onto the fire. So it's really critical that we make sure that this doesn't happen. This is a boat I surveyed last year. It was installed by the manufacturer. The owner of the boat bought the boat new 8 or 9 years ago. He needed a new survey for insurance purposes, and this is what we found. Is this an acceptable installation? And the answer is absolutely not, for several reasons. Number one, we see that it is not the appropriate bracket for the cylinder. The cylinder is able to rattle around. It's not the properly affixed to the cylinder, and the cylinder is sitting on the floor of the bilge and has the opportunity now to become submerged in water. Oops. Here you see a cylinder that has been installed. This is also an older system. It is horizontal, which is acceptable. And if you take a look, the actuator is actually facing what way? Well, it's not facing in the best possible way. And we should have a little bit better orientation. This one is sitting on the floor of the bilge. Although the bilge is nice and clean, certainly I would be concerned about water and the cylinder sitting in the water, thereby causing a greater rusting problem. Now, installation in a compartment larger than the volume rating. If you look on the cylinder, somewhere on the cylinder label, there must be the amount of volume that the cylinder can protect. So if we do the math, length times width times height equals cubic footage, we will then know how many cubic feet the system can in fact protect. Now, if we go to the ABYC standard, it tells us, okay, several important things in this particular area. One of the things is it tells us that there must be a permanently affixed label in the machinery compartment space that shall state the gross volume of the compartment less the volume of permanently installed tankage for the purpose of sizing fire protection equipment. Remember that if we were to deal with calculation of the volume of a engine compartment room, an engine space, what we need to remember is that the tank area comes out. So if we have a waste tank in the engine compartment, we have black water, we have a fresh water, we have a fuel tank, the volume of the area of that tank is subtracted. Engines are not. The volume or the capacity of the engine does not become subtracted from the cubic footage when we do the calculation. We then determine what is the volume of the space and compare it to what it says on the cylinder. Is the cylinder able to protect the space? So you're going to see in a few minutes is a survey that I did on a Ferretti 880. It was a 3-day survey, and what you will see is that the calculation showed that one cylinder was not adequate to protect the engine room. So a second cylinder was installed. Good idea? No, it was not acceptable. Why? Not the ABYC standard, but the manufacturer clearly states for that particular suppression system that you cannot add a second cylinder to provide you with the amount of extinguishing agent. And it's right in their instruction manual. You'll see the pictures in a second. So here you see a boat that I did recently, and it says fixed fire extinguisher system must be suitable for a compartment volume of 250 cubic feet. And if you take a close look on the cylinder, it says that this area protected is 250 cubic feet. So this system is acceptable for that particular vessel. Certainly, as surveyors, we should be looking for this type of information to make sure that the boat is adequately and properly protected. Okay. This is the Ferretti 880. It was a beautiful motor yacht. And as you can see, in the engine room, they have placed a second suppression system. Fireboy's manual clearly states that this cannot be done. So we had to write up in our report the recommendation that they remove the second cylinder, actually remove both cylinders, and install a larger cylinder that would meet the capacity of the engine room's volume. Certainly, the owner of the boat wasn't happy. However, it was the best possible way to protect the engine room. So again, these are things that we find that are becoming more and more problematic as we survey vessels. On a diesel-powered vessel, the fire suppression system shall be designed so that the engines, generators, and blowers located in a protected space shut down automatically, and after discharge, the minimum required design concentration must remain. That is an ABYC standard A4.8.5.3.1.1. And if you have questions about that, you can ask me at the end of the presentation. And I see that there are a couple other questions already being asked, so that's good. Now, the U.S. Coast Guard requires that there be an indicator light and legend plate at each helm station from which the vessel can be operated. The illuminated green light means that the system is charged and ready. A non-glowing light or red light means that the system has been discharged. Remember, however, that the ignition key must be turned on for the indicator to work. Right? I got a call from somebody recently who was surveying a boat and said, the indicator light isn't on. What should I tell the boat owner? And the answer was, did you turn the ignition on? No, turn the ignition on. As soon as you turned the ignition on, the light indicated a green light. The system was charged and ready. So make sure that when you are surveying a boat that you are looking for that green light, but the ignition key must be turned in the on position. Here you see the indicator light up at the helm station. Okay. Fixed fire suppression systems shall be capable of both automatic and manual operation. The vessel operator is operating the boat. Somebody says that they see smoke coming out of the engine compartment. And what do? He can activate the system manually by pulling the pin and then pulling the red handle. Now, what we have to be very concerned about is that going to work? So what we have to look for is the safety pin. When the manufacturer makes these systems and they put them into the boxes, crates to ship to the manufacturer, what have you, they place a safety pin to prevent an accidental discharge while the system is being transported. During the survey, are you as the surveyor looking to make sure that the pin has been removed? So a boat that I just did actually had this beautiful label on it. And it says the safety pin must be removed after cable, S-hook, and attachments are installed. Failure to do so will result in inability to manually operate the system. That is an awesome warning sign to find on the system. And not only did the installer do the right thing, he attached the pin to that label to show that the pin had been, in fact, properly removed. That's great. Now let's look at this one. Okay. What do we see here? Okay. This is a properly installed system, and we can see that everything is fine. However, let's look at this one. It looks great from here, but let's look a little bit more closely. And when we look a little bit more closely, what do we see? Well, in this case, I had to sneak around the back of the engine compartment to get a good picture. But what do we see here? There's the pin. It was never removed. The person up at the helm station could have pulled that handle all day long, and he never would have had an activation of the suppression system by manual operation. I will tell you that this system was installed 8 years ago, and the boat has had 3 surveys. I was the 3rd surveyor to survey this boat. It was surveyed at his purchase. It was surveyed 4 years after purchase for new insurance, and then I surveyed it the 3rd time when he changed insurance companies again. And the first 2 surveyors never caught the fact that the suppression system was going to work. That doesn't mean that I'm a genius. It just means that I happen to look for it. So again, these are things that I want to share with you so that we can make sure that these systems are going to work as designed. Okay, what's improper here? Well, if you take a close look, one of the questions that I have is, in what direction is the actuator facing, and is the nozzle facing out into the engine room, or facing towards the aft of the vessel to the transom? Okay, so what I want you to see is that there are many, many different problems that we can encounter. There are lots of concerns that we can have while we're dealing with these suppression systems. And this is just another area that we as surveyors have to look more in depth at. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You can contact me at my email address. You can call me on the phone. Just remember, if you're calling from somewhere out of the New York, New Jersey area, the time difference, but I love talking to fellow surveyors. Feel free to contact me at any time. Do I have enough time to talk about portable fire extinguishers, Mike?
You absolutely do, John. Yeah, you've got plenty of time.
Excellent. So let me just stop these slides and pull up the next set. That's the share screen. Okay.
Yeah, we have those, John. All clear.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about fire extinguishers. There's a lot of problems with fire extinguishers. There have been some significant changes to fire extinguishers. We now here in the United States are being told to use new designations for fire extinguishers, and it is certainly something that should be put into our reports. If we have to report on a fire extinguisher replacement, that we use the right terminology and things of that sort. So let's start off with one of the big problems. One of the big problems was the Kitty recall, and the Kitty Corporation, through the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, issued a recall that affected 134 different models, extinguishers manufactured between 1973 and 2017 were affected. So if we go on to a boat and we start doing our surveys, we very well might find presently on board a vessel a fire extinguisher, and it looks wonderful. The arrow is in the green, it's properly mounted in the holder, etc. And we say, that's great, you got a good fire extinguisher, when in fact it was in fact recalled. And that's really very, very important for us to be aware of, because there is a very good possibility that the fire extinguisher, in the event of an emergency, will not operate, and therefore the vessel occupants are using this thing, squeezing the handle, and nothing is coming out of the extinguisher. The reason for the recall was that there were 391 incidents of recorded failure. There was 1 recorded fatality at that time and 16 injuries that were reported because of the defect that was found on the fire extinguishers. So consequently, the federal government had this recall. It actually involved 44 million fire extinguishers. Believe it or not, the majority of those fire extinguishers were found in the marine industry. Yes, there were some in homes. All right. And I hate to tell you this, but I found one of them in my house. I have a fire extinguisher in the basement lower level near the furnace room, and it was one of the recalled ones. I also had 2 of the recalled ones on my boat. So it is certainly something that we can still find while we're surveying. Okay, these are some of the models that we should be looking for. The Mariner fire extinguisher are typically white in color, and if they are these classifications, they very well might be problematic. Therefore, we need to look for certain things. Okay, what should we be looking for? We should be looking for the date of manufacture. We should be looking for things like serial numbers and things of that nature. If you take notice, the 2 most significant things for us to look for on the recall fire extinguishers is the pin, back here. The pin here that you pull to activate so you can squeeze the handle is in a vertical position. All of the new fire extinguishers, the pin that we pull is in the horizontal position. The other thing to take note of is the handle is plastic. The newer units, the handles are in fact made out of lightweight metal. If you take a look right here, you see that there is an actuator pin. So when you squeeze the top handle down, the top handle compresses the actuator pin and causes the suppression system agent to expel from the extinguisher. What was discovered was the problem is when you pull that red pin so that you can use the extinguisher, if you pull it hard, your adrenaline is pumping, you're excited because there's a fire on board your boat. If you pull that real hard, what very well might happen is the plastic handle can slightly shift. And when you depress it, you will miss that little pin. And therefore, when you squeeze the handle, you're not depressing the pin, the actuator, and consequently, nothing will come out of the extinguisher. Okay, so that's one thing that we need to look at. Then in 2016, the Coast Guard did 2 very, very important things here in the United States. They now use Underwriters Laboratory for the basis of fire extinguisher classification. And secondly, they adopted NFPA Standard 10 for the maintenance and inspection of fire extinguishers. So if we are going to do a good job as a marine surveyor, what do we need to do? We need to have a copy of NFPA Standard 10 in our reference library. It's an expensive publication. I think it's like $65. If you want excerpts of it, I'll be happy to send you a particular section of the standard. I can't send you all of it. That's a violation of their copyright laws, but we'll work that out. But it is very, very important that we know about NFPA Standard 10. And if you take a look at the ABYC requirements, ABYC A4, which is entitled Firefighting Equipment, specifically references, all right, NFPA Standard 10, okay, in their A4 requirements. So what does this do? By taking the UL classification system, we will no longer find on fire extinguishers the concept of a fire extinguisher being B1 and B2. B1 and B2 designations were only found on marine fire extinguishers. That was an old Coast Guard requirement. What has now occurred is we are going to use the UL Underwriters Laboratory classification system, which utilizes a rating system that indicates the amount of fire the fire extinguisher is capable of extinguishing. So as you can see on the slide, we went from B1 and B2 to something like 2A, 5B, C. What does that mean? 2A means that it has the ability to extinguish Class A ordinary combustible materials of a particular square footage. It has the ability to extinguish 5 square feet of flammable liquid. And there's actually a test that's done, which is pretty cool, on how they determine that number. And C, it is able to be used on electrical equipment that is energized. Okay. And we're not even going to get into the lithium ion battery issue because I understand someone else is going to be talking about lithium ion batteries in a little bit. So here is NFPA Standard 10, the standard portable fire extinguishers, certainly something that marine surveyors need to be aware of and familiar with. It establishes the inspection criteria for all fire extinguishers. In addition to that, it creates 2 types of fire extinguishers by design. This is very, very important. There are rechargeable fire extinguishers and non-rechargeable fire extinguishers. Why is that important? Because what you are going to see is that the designation of rechargeable and non-rechargeable is going to determine how long the fire extinguisher may remain on someone's boat. Okay? There are 2 ways to determine the difference between a rechargeable and a non-rechargeable fire extinguisher. One is the design, and the second is the warning label. What do we mean by the design? The design means that the extinguisher where the gauge is a sealed component so that it cannot be unscrewed for refilling. And you will see that it is very, very obvious that it is a non-refillable type fire extinguisher. The refillable fire extinguisher, you will actually see that that whole top portion where the gauge and handle are actually is designed to unscrew from the system. It'll also tell you that it is a non-refillable cylinder on the label. Now, you know, there was always an old saying that my parents used to tell me, and that was read the fine print. Well, we got to read the fine print, and it tells me on the fine print here, blah, 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 that this system must, or this fire extinguisher must be installed and inspected and maintained in accordance with NFPA Standard 10, the standard entitled portable fire extinguishers. And then it says this product must be removed from service 12 years after the date of manufacture. That's critical. All right. How many surveyors are actually taking the extinguisher? The gauge is great. It says it's green. It's ready to go. Blah, blah, blah. It looks great. But are you taking it off of the bulkhead? Are you taking it out of the holder? Are you taking it out of the bracket and looking at the bottom? This fire extinguisher was found on board a vessel December 2017. It was made in 1993. add 12, okay? It was far beyond its 12 years of allowable use, okay? And again, this boat had been previously surveyed. Why was it found on there? Well, the surveyor didn't look at the extinguisher the way they should have, okay? So again, make sure that you are looking closely at these types of things so that we can assure that the equipment in the event of an emergency is going to be usable by the people on board the vessel. Now, for boats that were built before August 2016, previously installed extinguishers with extinguishing capacities that are smaller than what is now required do not need to be replaced, and they can continue to be in service until they have to be replaced. Any new equipment must meet the new applicable requirements. So what does that mean? My boat was built before 2016. I have 2 fire extinguishers on it that are B1 designated fire extinguishers. A B1 designated fire extinguisher does not meet 2A 5B-C requirements. But the Coast Guard says I can keep it there. I can continue to have them on my boat and continue to have them as acceptable for use until such time that I have to replace them. They're older than 12 years old, take them out of service and replace them with now the new required capacity, 2A 5B-C. Okay, so let me stop sharing here and let you all see my ugly mug. Okay. Questions about fire extinguishers. Okay. Anybody have a question? Let me see here. Ronald, you asked a question. Let me see what your question is. 2 pound to 2.5 pound DC portable fire, I think it should be BC portable fire extinguisher manufactured here on the bottom. Are they still good for 12 years, or has this changed? The fixed fire systems, with example, also a 12-year limit of life on the bottle. Okay, so when you take a look, you're going to find that the portable fire extinguisher, the handheld fire extinguishers, that's going to be found, that information is going to be found on the bottom of the fire extinguisher. So we have to take it out of the bracket, turn it upside down and look. For fixed fire suppression systems, if they meet the United States Department of Transportation requirements, which is what we are bound to use here in the United States, and Canada DOT also has the same requirement, that date of manufacture is required to be stamped into the metal at the neck of the cylinder. So we should see that a lot easier, or what you will see is it might be found on the label. Canada requires yearly certification. The United States does not. And if you take a look, and if you would like, I'll be happy to send this to you. I have actually got from Fireboy a letter that explains why fire suppression systems, cylinders, etc., do not need to be inspected on an annual basis in the United States. And I'll be happy to share that with anybody who has that concern or question. Okay. Other questions, please ask. I'd love to talk.
So there's a couple more popped into chat. Harold says Canada requires yearly certification, but that's not so in the USA. Question.
That is correct. And I will send the letter of clarification to anybody who would like that from the manufacturer of the systems, and it explains why. Please email me and I'll send that right out to you. And if
Patrick,
anybody wants the slide presentation, I'll be happy to share both fixed fire suppression and portable fire extinguishers with any of you.
John, if you want to send those over to me by email, I'll make sure when we package all the videos up and so on, we include those as PDFs, if that works for you.
Absolutely, yes, sir. That'd be wonderful.
Okay. Patrick wants to know, what is the current inspection schedule for fixed systems?
That's a great question, Patrick. And the answer is, and I hate to say this, it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the manufacturer. It's going to depend on the cylinder's material. So for an example, and I will send you all this information because it is a compilation of multiple agencies in one explanatory. If it is a aluminum cylinder, it gets one type of requirement. If it is a steel cylinder, it requires a different one. And I know, Richard, you are correct. Some U.S. insurers believe fire extinguishers on U.S. flagged pleasure vessels must be inspected and tagged annually, and that is not true. Fireboy with surface corrosion not serviceable. Harold, that's a great question. And the answer is it's going to come down to being a surveyor's judgment call. Is it corrosion where just the paint is starting to blister off of the metal, or is the metal corroded? If the metal is starting to corrode, we got that orangey, rusty color, the system's no good. It has to be replaced.
There's a question there, John, from Ronald. It is a question. It's more of a statement because you can't answer it. Why do they put the label on the fixed fire system bottles where you can't read it when installed by a fire technician? I don't know what the answer to that is.
If I knew the answer to that, Mike, I would also know the 6 numbers for tonight's lottery.
Just crazy, isn't it? I know, it's just ridiculous. Any questions from the room?
Why is it that you only see the occasional sailboat with a diesel engine with a fire suppression system? Is it not legislated?
Did you hear that, John?
No, sorry, I did not. Could you repeat it?
Do a bit louder, please, Ross.
For small private sail vessels with a diesel engine, sometimes you come across a fire suppression system. Most of the time, I don't. Is there no regulatory or ABYC guideline for a fire system for a small diesel engine in a sailboat?
There is no requirement.
Thank you.
Me personally, I would like to see everything provided with a fire suppression system. However, there is no requirement found stating that it must. And when we look at A4, I have it right here in front of me. Let me really quick go to A4. Fixed fire suppression systems. It does not tell me in A4 when they have to be installed. They simply say when they are installed, this is what they must have.
Okay, thank you.
Please, other questions?
I have an observation for you.
Yes, sir.
There's a guy called Ian Nicholson, who some of you may have heard of, who's a 93-year-old, no, he's more than that, he's 95-year-old marine surveyor based in Scotland, still working, still doing small craft. And he talks always about the forensic nature of a surveyor's job. And what you pointed out today by looking at pins and that type of thing is a forensic process. And Ian always makes me laugh because he said, if you see a split pin missing, he said, you should report it. And everybody said, oh, it's bloody Ian Nicholson again. You know, he's being so pedantic. But Ian says, well, a split pin matters. It's only, you know, half a buck. It costs nothing, but it matters. And it's the same, I think, with the fire suppression stuff, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I just wanted to make another observation. That gentleman God bless him, 95 years old and still surveying. I hope I'm still surveying when I'm 75. Um, the concern that I have is this. I do quite a few marine fire investigations. I'm a certified fire investigator, etc. So it's only a natural thing to do. So let me pose the following question. I survey a boat, or let me rephrase that. You survey a boat, and a year later the boat catches fire. And I come to do the fire investigation. And in the course of my fire investigation, I find that the suppression system was not properly installed. The pin was not removed prior to installation, and therefore the suppression system didn't work. What liability now does the surveyor who did the survey the year before the fire now bring upon himself? Well, I will tell you that if I'm the investigator, I'm going to tell the insurance company there's another deep pocket to go after. So to protect ourselves, we really need to be looking at this type of stuff.
No, that's good advice, John. Really good advice. Any other questions from anybody?
Where can we access this list of recalled fire extinguishers?
Where can we access the list of recalled fire extinguishers was the question, John.
Excellent question. You can dig at it in two ways. One is go to www.kitty.com. The manufacturer has a list of it on their website. I also have a list of it, and I can send it to anybody who requests it.
So that's www.kidde.com.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I'm not near my car. I actually have in one of my folders that I keep in the car the list of all of the models that are recalled, so that if I go on board a vessel and I am not sure 100%, I'll take that out and I can refer to it. I actually have made a whole bunch of copies, and I'll give it to the boat owner so he sees that it's not something that I'm making up. And the other thing is this, and I hate to say this, but we have to, and there's that old saying, caveat emptor, buyer beware. So I'm going to replace the fire extinguisher on my boat. I go to a large marine supply facility here in the United States, and I take the fire extinguisher off the shelf. And I open up the box, and right away, one of the salespeople, why are you opening the box? I said, I want to see something. And I took the extinguisher out of the box, and I turned it upside down. And it was 2021. Now, that's fine. It's not a recall fire extinguisher, but remember, because it's not a non-rechargeable cylinder, it's only good for 12 years. Well, this is 2024. I've already lost 3 years of my 12. So that fire extinguisher is only good for the next 9 years. I'm not buying something that's already 3 years towards its end of service life. So again, when we go to the store, when we advise our clients and surveyors, these are things that we should help them become more aware of, so that we are providing the best possible service to everybody involved.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll be online with the rest of the presentations for today, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about my favorite subject, confined spaces and air monitoring instruments, and how the surveyor needs to be aware of that. And we'll talk about the recent accident in the British Virgin Islands that resulted in a fatality on board a vessel. So we look forward to seeing all of you again tomorrow. Thank you for having me participate today.
That's fantastic, John. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your presentation.